Growing up, the youngest of 4 siblings, others can attest to this, but we were the butt of all the jokes. We were ridiculed by all of our siblings. But the one thing that got under my heart and soul that my loving sister, who I loved to bits and pieces, did to me was convince me I was adopted. I grew up with my mom's side of the family, and my aunt, my mom's sister, would go with us everywhere. We were really close, and whenever we went out, everyone always thought I was my aunt's daughter. We would go out. My aunt also has other daughters, and they would ask her, like, oh, this is Malola's your oldest. And she's like, no, this is my niece. And I would always laugh it off, nothing serious. And then, of course, one day my sister was berating me and trying to convince me I was adopted. And she's like, Malola, why do you think everyone confuses you for auntie's daughter? Mom was so old and she couldn't have any more babies, so she asked auntie to have a baby for her, and then she took you and adopted you. You're actually auntie's biological daughter. And at that point in my mind, everything clicked. She was like, why do you think auntie lives next door to us? Why do you think she's here every weekend? Why do you think everyone confuses you as her kid? Because you are. Another thing to mention was that growing up, my mom has a ton of videos and pictures of my elder siblings, the 3, but she has rarely or scarce of me. And that was because the year I was born, my parents also bought a business that they ran, and so they didn't have that much time to take photos and videos like they did for my other siblings. And my sister also used that against me. She's like, you don't even have photos with us. You don't have no home videos. Where are your birthday party tapes? You don't have them because they don't exist. You don't exist in our family because you weren't with us. We caught you when you were 5. Try to find a video of you or a picture of you before 5 years old. And I couldn't find them. And the ones that I did have, my aunt were in all of them. And so I decided to have a serious conversation with my mom. Mind you, I was not a child when this conversation happened. I was at least 13, 14, and I sat my mom down and I told her, I'm like, Mom, I love you. You will always be my mother, but please, for my sanity, you have to tell me, is auntie my biological mom? I was like, just be honest with me. I promise I won't be mad, but I need you to tell me, am I your daughter? And so she asked me, she's like, what will make you believe me that I'm your mom? And I told her, find me an ultrasound picture. Because all the other 3 had ultrasound pictures, but not me. And she looked at me. It took her a while, but she found the pictures. Now, as a 25-year-old, I look back at it, I'm like, my sister got me good. Also, my mom and I are twins. I don't know how I ever believed her in the first place.
He lived with a dead body? True crime, story time. This is Carl Tanzler. In 1931, Carl was 56 at the time and working at a hospital in Florida where he met a woman named Maria. When they met, Maria was dying from tuberculosis, which was a terminal condition in the 1930s. Throughout her last years of life, Carl took care of Maria. He bought her expensive gifts, and he even bought her an expensive mausoleum when she died. Her passing really took a toll on Carl, and he would go to her gravesite and sing her beautiful love songs, which is kind of cute, but then it got weird. Soon after, Carl claimed that he was getting haunted by Maria's spirit, and the spirit kept requesting that Carl needed to remove her from her tomb and take her home. Eventually, I guess the spirit's request became overwhelming, so Carl did what she said. He grabbed a wagon, went to her tomb, removed her, put her in the wagon, and took her home. But of course, this body needed to be preserved because bodies decay when they're dead. So he covered her skin with silk and plaster, kept her bones together with wires and coat hangers, and also replaced her eyes with glass ones. And to cover up the rotting smell, he would just spray her with perfume. On top of all that, for the next 7 years, Tanzler had to upkeep her body. So he would have to repair her skin and bones, disinfect her. He would even buy her new clothes and more perfume to cover up the smell. Things started to get weird when someone witnessed Tanzler dancing with what appeared to be a life-size doll in his window. Rumors started spreading that he may have had the body in his house because He kept buying women's clothing. He stopped going to her gravesite. And then on top of that, someone saw him dancing in his window with a life-size doll that looked like Maria. Rumors got so bad that Maria's sister went to Carl Tanzler's house and he let her in, where she saw what she thought was a life-size doll of her sister. She then went to police, and police came to investigate to find out that the doll was actually Maria. However, because the statute of limitations on his crime had already lapsed, meaning legally too much time had passed, so technically he couldn't get in trouble for his crime. So he didn't go to prison, even though what he did was disgusting.
Story time about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Should I leave him? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. So sad about the palette. My fiance and I met a few years ago through friends. When we first met each other, I had a really bad first impression of him. First off, he was completely up himself. All he did was talk about himself and never once asked me questions. We were surrounded by other people, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt when he asked me out. I said yes, but our first date was kind of the same. He only really talked about himself, his career, the things he likes to do, his favorite foods, his family, his dog. I eventually just started volunteering information because he wouldn't really ask me. After our date, I didn't speak to him for a full 2 weeks. I was really turned off by his attitude, but then he messaged me saying that he was really nervous and that he realizes that he probably could have been a little more talkative. I said, yeah, you could have been. I told him how I really felt and he did apologize and he asked me out to dinner again. This time I invited him to my apartment and he made us a full 4-course meal. By the way, he's a chef. Obviously, that night, I completely fell in love with him. He made all of my favorite foods, but the gourmet version. A few months later, we became boyfriend and girlfriend. There were still a few things that I didn't like about him, though. Like, he never really had anything to talk about other than himself. Exactly a year after we met, he decided to propose, and I said yes. But when I asked him to do things for the wedding, he says no. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I said I'm on Instagram. To be honest, when he asked me to marry him, I was totally blindsided. Honestly, felt like our relationship was starting to get stale. So when he asked me to marry him, I was like, for real? He told me that I was the first person who ever made him feel important. And looking back, I realized that it's because he only talked about himself and I really let him talk about only himself. Anyway, we immediately said yes out of the excitement. But when I called my mom to tell her, I was actually crying, which is like, okay, maybe I shouldn't marry him then. A few weeks into our engagement, we hadn't talked about planning at all. So I decided to ask him, like, what do you want the wedding to be like? That's when he told me that he didn't really care, but that he would just give me money for it. I mean, on one hand, that makes me really happy because I don't want my parents to have to pay for the wedding, and he has a lot of money. But on the other hand, I want him to be involved, especially for the food because he's a chef. I decided to hire a wedding planner because my job is extremely busy. I work in marketing. Asked him to go to a few meetings with me. He said no. When I finally found the perfect wedding planner, I asked my fiance if we could go have lunch with him, and he said no. This is when I blew up in his face. I asked him why he wasn't participating at all. That's when he told me that he was too busy at the restaurant, that he didn't have time to do anything with the wedding. I was like, okay, fine. When it came time to choosing the caterers, I demanded that he go with me. He told me that he would try to get off work, but he never did. Every time I tried to schedule it, he would say that he was busy with work. That's when I told him that his restaurant, which is super fancy, should just cater the whole wedding. And he said no. He told me they were way too busy and ready to get a Michelin star, so there was absolutely no way they could cater his wedding. That's when he said, you can handle it. I trust you. I went home and cried the entire night. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my fiance refuses to help me plan our wedding. Claimers to know my story time. I sent me on Instagram. After I got home and cried, he came home and asked me what was wrong. That's when I told him that he didn't seem excited about the wedding and that leaving all the planning to me made me feel like I was his employee, as if I had nothing better to do, which I do have my career just like he has his. Not to mention the fact that me picking everything I want for our wedding makes it feel like it's my wedding and not ours. He told me that I was overreacting. He also said that he was excited for the wedding, but that he was too tired and too busy to even think about it. That's when I told him that I was really busy and I was really tired too. Then he begrudgingly told me that he would carve out some time this week so that we could speak to some of the caterers. I told the wedding planner and he started setting up some meetings. But of course, my fiance canceled on the first 2. He did show up to the 3rd one, but all he did was criticize the food. Then we went cake tasting. I expected this to be fun. When my friends have had cake tastings for their wedding, they always have so much fun. As soon as we showed up to the cake shop, he asked me, where did you find this? That's when I told him that our planner had found it. He said it looked like a supermarket bakery. That's when I told him that I don't mind supermarket bakeries and that it was probably just as good as a French bakery. He laughed and said, wow, you're funny, babe. We tasted the cakes and he actually liked them. Thank God. But then he requested to go to more cake tastings. We ended up going to 5 other places. This was already too much for me. I got a new account at work and I'm still trying to lose weight for the wedding. So him making me run around trying to taste cake is like the straw that broke the camel's back. After 2 weeks, we finally decided on a cake flavor. Most people must have fun planning their weddings, right? But I just feel like I'm drowning. I have to make all the important decisions on my own. I decided to involve my mom and sister and they've helped me so much. Of course, the wedding planner is helping me too, but ultimately the decisions have to be made by me. He hasn't made any effort to help me with anything else. Kinda want to break up with him, but I feel like this isn't a big enough reason to break up with him. What should I do?